Okay, as I said earlier, the cell membrane's job is to let things in and out of the cell. It's keeping us homeostatic. In other words, it's keeping all of our cells in balance so we can stay alive. The way that cells move substances across the cell membrane happens in two different ways, either by passive transport or active transport. Passive transport, it's passive. If someone's a passive person, they're not very energetic. Substances cross the cell membrane without using any energy. There happens to be three types: diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. In passive transport, particles are going from where there's a lot to where there's not a lot. In other words, it said going from high concentration to low concentration. Active transport, substances cross the cell membrane, and energy has to be there. There has to be lots of mitochondria there providing energy. The cell needs energy in order to move the substance across the cell membrane because now the particles are going from low concentration to high concentration. They're going from where there's not a lot to where there's a lot, and in order to do that, you have to have energy applied. It'd be like having 100 people in this classroom and trying to shove more people in here. We would have to rearrange, use energy to squish people around to get even more people in the room. We're going to talk more about active transport in a different video. Passive transport. With passive transport, we are talking about either diffusion, facilitated diffusion, or osmosis. Diffusion, the process by which substances spread through a liquid or gas. Substances move from high concentration to low concentration, no energy is needed. With diffusion, we are not always referring to a cell. It can happen in your cells, but not always. If I spray perfume in the classroom, at my desk, who would be the first people to smell it? Who would be the last people to smell that? That smell of that perfume is diffusing throughout the room. It's going from where there was a lot to where there's not a lot and eventually filling up the room with the smell of that perfume. That's diffusion. But it also takes place in the cell. Particles can go from where there's high concentration to where there's low, go into the cell or out of the cell as needed. I am going to just show you a YouTube video of an example for diffusion. This may take a little while for it to load, and we're not going to watch the whole thing.
When the Galaxy Note launched in 2011, it was ahead of its time. And naturally, when things are new and different, sometimes people aren't ready for them. Experts saw the bigger screen and were like, "You look like you're talking into a piece of toast." The Note is an unwieldy beast. Now it's not being dismissed by competitors, it's being imitated. Thing is, the Note is more than big. It's about being more productive. Wait for it. I like that part. More innovative. Oh, cool. More fun. Today people are saying, is it just me or does the new iPhone 6 look like a Samsung Galaxy Note 2 from 2012? It's cute how Apple thinks their phablet is a fresh idea when Samsung Mobile has been excelling at them for years already. Hashtag next big thing. The new Samsung Galaxy Note 4. The next big thing is here.
Okay, sorry about the video, or the commercial. Diffusion, the action of spreading the light from a light source evenly so as to reduce the glare and harshness. Okay, diffusion. There is a cup of lukewarm water, and they're just putting food coloring in the water. The food coloring is going from where there's high concentration to low concentration. It is spreading out. It is diffusing. More diffusion. It's eventually going to fill up the whole cup with the blue food coloring. So the food coloring is diffusing throughout the cup of water. No energy was applied there. It's just automatically happening. Going from high concentration, where there's a lot of it, spreading out to make it even throughout the whole cup of water. You could pretend that that is your cell, filling up with an important substance that you need. Okay, so that is diffusion. I'm going to be doing more demonstrations for diffusion in the classroom. Facilitated diffusion, the process by which larger substances diffuse across the cell membrane by going through those protein channels. Maybe sugar, it can't fit through those lipids, so it has to go through those protein channels or protein tunnels. Salt is another example. There is a picture, a diagram of this in the very first sheet. I talked about it in the first video. Many cell membranes contain protein channels that will allow larger particles to pass in and out of the cell. These particles are being facilitated. These particles, in other words, are being helped. The word facilitate means to help. Here is a specific example. It's going to be hard for me to actually demonstrate this. Okay, so I'm just going to have to talk about it. Examples. The cell membrane of red blood cells contain protein channels that allow the passage of only one substance, and that substance, glucose. You should know glucose is sugar. As a result, glucose can diffuse either into or out of the cell through these channels. Because the diffusion of glucose is facilitated or helped by the protein, it is called facilitated diffusion. Okay. The third type of passive transport, no energy being applied, is the diffusion of water in and out of a cell membrane. Osmosis is water in or out of a membrane. Usually only substances that dissolve in lipids can pass through the cell membrane. However, water is the one very important exception to that rule. Water cannot dissolve in lipids, aka water cannot dissolve into a fat. They repel each other, but for some reason our cells allow water to squeeze through those lipids to get in and out. And it can pass through very easily. The picture on the first page showed an example of osmosis. It was permeable to water, permeable meaning being able to go in and out, but that membrane would not let sugar in and out. The sugar was not permeable. On one side of the membrane is sugar solution, on the other side is water, and it's trying to show you that the water is going in and out. That's what the arrows were indicating. Water can provide a lot of pressure. As you know, water flowing down the river, we use that to generate electricity for us. So water is a very powerful force. Water pressure is known as osmotic pressure. When water moves by osmosis, it can produce a powerful pressure. And this pressure could actually destroy your cells. It's so powerful. The cytoplasm of a typical cell is also filled with not just water, but some salts and sugars, and there's other dissolved nutrients. Therefore, if a dilute water solution would come in direct contact with our cell, our cells would fill rapidly up with water, and they could die by the process of osmosis if this process was uncontrolled. So our cells have to control what's called osmotic pressure. And depending on the type of cell you are, depends on how you control that. If you are a plant, you're going to use your cell wall. All plants and some bacteria have cell walls, and a lot of protists have cell walls. Most protists lives in water. Water is constantly going in and out. They're going to have a wall to protect them from exploding if the water is rushing in. So some single-celled organisms and some multi-celled organisms like plants have a strong cell wall that prevents the cell from expanding so much that it will burst. So plants, some bacteria, and some protists use the cell wall to protect themselves against the osmotic pressure or water pressure. Protists that do not have a cell wall will pump out the water as it comes in. They have a special cell part that we did not discuss in the last chapter that actually pumps out the water as it comes in. So we're going to be talking mostly about protists for example 2. Example 3, we're talking multicellular organisms like animals. We bathe our cells in blood. Blood and blood cells and our other cells, the concentration of them are very equal to each other. Animals prevent their cells from being in direct contact with pure water. Cells need water to survive. Therefore, these animals bathe their cells in blood or blood-like liquids. Animals' blood and its cells have nearly the same concentration of solutes, like salts, so that our cells don't just explode all over the place when we come in contact with water. Our blood is protecting that. Now, there are types of osmosis. There's plasmolysis and cytolysis. Plasmolysis is when water leaves the cell. Osmotic pressure is lost, the cell wilts. You would see an example of this if you didn't water your plants for a while and they started drooping. And basically what's happening is the vacuole is losing water, the cell membrane does shrink up, and the cell is able to kind of get droopy. Cytolysis, water enters the cell, osmotic pressure is gained, the cell will swell up, but yet it's still protected either by the cell wall or water being pumped out or by the blood, but it still will swell up. And in humans we know that swelling as edema. And I'm going to have some more examples in class about diffusion, osmosis, plasmolysis, and cytolysis.